In today's episode of Vice Versa, we're talking about the Tesla Giga-Berlin fest that just happened and all the information that came out of it, the fallout from the GM and LG battery debacle and how things are shaping up there, Foxconn joining the fray and creating their own EV, and also William Shatner going to space. And as usual, I'm joined by Ricky Roy. How you doing, Ricky?
Doing good, Matt. Doing good. We were off last week, so it's been 2 weeks since our last show, but hopefully you guys are joining us and didn't forget about us. We're here. What was your video this week, by the way, Matt?
I covered a topic that you've covered, aluminum air batteries, and kind of addressed the hype that came out around them about the 1,000-mile battery. And it's like, but you can't recharge them. And it was kind of a fun topic to talk about. And is battery swapping going to become a thing?
You know, I know it's for us in the U.S., that sounds like a non-starter, but you got to imagine there are rural places in the world where like it wouldn't be the end of the world for me to drive around town all month and then go to my city center to just do a swap and then go back home, almost like a propane tank kind of a thing, right?
Yep.
So as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about some of the rural areas I've been to, like in India, for example. This is where it's becoming very popular. It actually could really make sense because it's a different kind of business model, but yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Great video as always by Matt. This week, our video is a day late. We're going to publish it tomorrow. It's on the iron flow battery and this company called ESS, which actually just went public and turned their ticker symbol around. So it's actually one of the most promising technologies in energy storage that I've seen this year. So it's like my really excited one. So bookmark that. It'll be out tomorrow. Should be fun.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah,
So
generally been a crazy week, but let's get started.
Yeah, let's get started. You want to kick it off?
Yes. So the big news, I think, for the week was not that I was invited, but I would have loved to have gone, was Tesla's Giga-Berlin event. And here is, we'll talk about this kind of in two forms, but really look at this. This is the 4680 cell in their structural battery pack. If you look at kind of the ribbing and the layout of how this is all put together, this is a part of the structure. This helps with the integrity and the chassis rigidity and flexing of the car. And if you remember back from Battery Day, Elon said, and his example, his analogy was to aviation, where in aviation, you have a lot of the fuel in the wings. And so the wing is not just a lifting member, it's actually where the fuel is stored. This is kind of his analogy here. What's really cool is you can see the cooling ribbons, you can see the in and out here, how they snake through. It's super cool. I wish I was there to see this thing. And even in this picture, which is hard to get a sense of reference and scale, Matt, look at the size of these battery cells. I mean, you can tell they're
huge.
They're massive. Absolutely. So this does raise a question. So their factory in Berlin is going to be commissioned and up and running pretty soon. They're going to scale that up to some pretty lofty and amazing numbers in the near term. But one question I still have, and I'm not fully aware of, is if the Model Y will be 4680 based or if it'll be 2170 or both. Both sounds kind of tough to pull off. There's some challenges that could potentially arise there, but this thing is going to be seriously important. And don't forget about the huge giga casting machines. This video, let me just play this for a second. Look at this, 10% mass reduction. And that comes from, instead of having all these stamped parts you have to rivet or weld, you've got these big casting machines that cast it all, 14% range increase. So that means that they're going to have, their Model Ys are going to be built with fewer parts, probably better margins. And this factory is going to be pretty the latest and greatest and cutting edge. It's a brand new factory as opposed to retrofitting an old factory. The second part of the story is just the loftiness of their goals and what they're going to be able to produce. So they're saying they could build a car body every 45 seconds, which is more than 600,000 cars a year. Now that would be like 24/7, never taking a break. That's not realistic. But even if it was 500,000 or something more in that range, this is still huge news. And this would make Tesla's 3s and Ys that they build there the best-selling cars, the best-selling kind of premium cars in Germany. And I think this has to get the attention of companies like Mercedes and BMW, who are already losing to Tesla here in North America, and I think also in large parts of Europe. But this is not going to do them any wonders there. What do you think about all this, Matt?
There were so many things I kind of got out of this that I thought were fascinating. Like you brought up the battery pack and the casted front and back, but they're also attaching the seats. I didn't realize they were attaching the seats directly to the battery pack itself. So they basically can build the base of the car. Essentially, it's more than this, but basically 3 gigantic pieces with the seats attached, and then they can lower the body chassis on top, which dramatically simplifies the building of the car, reduces dozens of parts. So you can understand why they can churn out cars so quickly. And I've heard some people talking about how like this is like one of the biggest, car plants in Germany, which is not the case. This is not the largest factory in Germany, but this is a factory that goes basically toe to toe with pretty much every other factory that's in Germany. And even though they might only be pumping out 500,000 cars and VW might be able to pump out 800,000 cars at one of their factories, the thing I thought was fascinating was that if you look at the square footage, VW has a factory that's got 6.5 million square feet. It's in Wolfsburg, Germany. Compared to the, 1.9 million square feet of the Gigafactory. Now you're talking about like at peak, maybe 800,000 cars versus 500,000 cars. If you kind of do the math there, it almost makes the Gigafactory basically twice as efficient for their use of space, which to me is just bananas. And when I saw like the difference in size and how much they can actually pump out, it really just shows how they've rethought the process of building a car to make it as efficient as possible, and that they're going to have those 8 gigapresses in the factory. And that's one of the reasons they're going to be able to pump out these cars so fast. Of course, it's all going to be like Model Y coming out of those presses to start. But this just kind of shows how they're completely kind of overturning the industry a little bit when it comes to manufacturing and using the first principles thinking to kind of come at it from square one, where all the big auto manufacturers have this history and legacy and investments that they've already put in. It's making them slow to shift to more efficient technologies, which is giving Tesla a huge edge per square foot, which just kind of blows me away.
The Giga casting machines are probably one of the big parts of the story. I think Tesla's story and their passion for manufacturing gets overshadowed by like FSD, for example, which to me the manufacturing story is way more interesting. Like you mentioned, they're pretty new to this. We've had Volkswagen and others around for a very long time, but yeah, Tesla seems to be taking risk, and I think the Giga castings there is some risk. Like for example, when they're at full rate production, how many issues will they have? The bigger the piece that you're casting, you can have like twisting and warping and little imperfections, or maybe the injection wasn't perfect. There's a lot more. It's a challenging thing to do, but I think they're going to figure this out, and it's going to be pretty amazing. The reduction in floor space that you mentioned, it kind of makes sense with what they're doing, because without that, every time you have a stamping machine, you have this big machine that takes like a piece of sheet metal and has like a die cast. It's like a stamp that presses it into the right shape, and then you take a bunch of these together and you're having to either rivet or weld them. Every one of those machines is massive, and if you're replacing a lot of that with just a big old cast machine, that's pretty amazing stuff. This is the part of the Tesla story I think that's so interesting. We were chatting before we went live. The really cool part about this is if you're a European customer now, you're not competing with everybody else trying to get your cars out of Fremont. Now you have your own dedicated supply. And the same goes for people here. So if you're waiting for your car, you don't have to compete with the Europeans now. The Europeans have their own factory. This is always the promise, right? I have a Gigafactory on every continent, and they're doing this. This is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm really curious where the next one is going to be, because they're going to have to build another one. Is it going to be India? Some people have said Russia, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because there's not a lot of car sales in Russia, so it doesn't make sense. But someplace like India makes a whole lot of sense to me because there's a huge market potential there. So it's like I'm just really curious to see where it kind of goes from here. But once you've got Austin and Berlin and Shanghai all kind of humming along, Tesla's doing some really impressive stuff now.
Yeah, and all their numbers, we keep kind of losing sight of this, but all their sales until very recently were all from Fremont. And then they add Shanghai, now they add Giga-Berlin, Austin comes online. Their sales could quadruple. Their numbers can absolutely easily quadruple. So I think they're able to do that also with a good profit margin, and they don't have to deal with the dealership networks and everything else. So yeah, it's a really awesome show. I wish we had gotten an invite, but maybe next time.
Well, the other thing that we haven't talked about is the paint factory. Supposedly the paint factory is cutting edge, and it's going to give them really, really good quality paint on their cars. And we still have problems with paint on Tesla cars being delivered today. So it's like, I'm hopeful, like if they've cracked that nut in the Gigafactory in Berlin, I hope the same thing's going into Austin. I hope they retrofit Fremont with whatever they did over there, because it would be awesome to see that kind of argument of the paint quality just going away if they've actually solved it. I wish they had shown more from that during the GigaFest.
I think in time, yeah, it'll all happen in time. So then what about panel gaps? This is the thing that I think, and I think it's always kind of, I think I've always said it's been overstated. Yeah. My car was pretty nice, but I have seen some pretty bad examples. Does that get fixed with the new factories, or is that something they need to keep dialing in? I actually don't know the challenge there. I'd love to get somebody who could tell us like why Porsche has such great whatever and someone else doesn't, like what it is and what can be done about it. But what do you think? Is that going to improve?
I think it will. I mean, they're reducing the parts. They're doing these castings now for parts of the car, and I wouldn't be surprised if it helps make the cars more square and makes it a little more rigid and easy to kind of get things aligned properly. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see the cars coming. This is the part that I was saying to you before we started the show of like, the cars coming out of the Berlin are probably going to be a higher quality than what are coming out of Fremont. So you're going to have cars that probably have better paint. They might be a little more square, have better panel gaps. It's like, it might be an actual better Model Y coming out of Berlin. And you could almost say the same thing, what's coming out of Shanghai. The Model 3s coming out of there might actually be slightly better quality than what's coming out of Fremont. And it's not a knock against the employees that work at Fremont. It's just the systems that were set up, they've learned a lot. Every factory they learn and they make adjustments for the next factory. So it's kind of like, I hope they can take the time to take what they've learned from the latest factories and kind of retrofit Fremont to kind of bring it up on that quality bar.
Yeah, and the choice for Giga-Berlin, I think, was probably a difficult choice because it's an expensive part of the world to build cars, just like Fremont, for example. But Germans and Germany are known as manufacturing like masters. To me, it's the best manufacturing countries are probably like Japan and Germany are the two countries that come to mind. So putting a factory there, building high quality cars. Imagine if like the media and the press stopped with all the panel gap stuff because like the Model 3s coming out of Germany for all the European customers were like as spot on as any of the German cars. I think that's a good story to tell. So I think, it'll be a little more expensive potentially operationally, but I think the end result to the story is a good one.
Yeah, I agree. And we also had a super chat I just want to call out really quick. Thanks to Robert Klauko. He gave us a super chat. Thank you so much for a good stream start.
Thank you, Robert.
Appreciate that.
Yes, we've had issues. I've had some issues recently, but yes, we should be good on this one.
So yeah, you ready for the next story?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the next one is the sad debacle around the whole GM Chevy Bolt battery fires and issues in the recall. We're starting to see the end of this happen and how things are shaking out. And so it turns out that LG has agreed to pay GM $1.9 billion for this battery debacle. And in total, it's cost GM about $2 billion. So essentially, LG is paying for the whole thing, which I found kind of shocking. I thought that was kind of a big surprise to me that they're actually covering pretty much the entire cost of this recall. But the saddest part about all the recall is that it's still not done. It's like they're still manufacturing the new battery packs, and they're only going to be starting to actually replace them starting this month. So all these Chevy Bolt users have basically been told, do not charge your car to 100%. Don't charge it in your garage overnight. Immediately after charging it, take it outside and let it sit outside. So there's all these things that Chevy Bolt owners have been having to kind of take care, because who knows if their battery is going to be good or not. And even after the battery replacements, evidently, they're going to be pushing out a flash software update that's going to, for the affected vehicles, that will drop the maximum state of charge to 80% and will slowly ease it up to 100% and give back garage charging privileges based on how well the battery is actually performing. So this whole thing has been, to me, the saddest part of the story is just, it doesn't do any good things for EV adoption, because here's these headlines of EVs exploding in people's garages and burning houses down, and they're scary. The whole booga booga aspect of the story is not great for people who are thinking about buying their first EV, and then they see stories like this happen. I really hope this is just a one-off, and we don't see this kind of rear its ugly head again with another company, whether it's BMW or VW or whoever. I hope this is just kind of lesson learned. Let's move on and hope everybody's doing their due diligence so that we don't see this crop up again, because it's not good for EV adoption.
It's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. I was kind of thinking more about like GM's reputation,
Yeah.
which is already kind of murky to begin with. There's people have some strong opinions there. The way this was handled reminds me. Do you remember in the 90s when I was a kid and all the uncles and aunties were buying minivans? There was the Toyota Previa. It was the minivans with a very, very small front trunk. It's like most of the engine was like under your seat, under the driver's basically seat. So the Ford had what they called the Aerostar, which was this hideous, terrible thing, which had the same problem. It was very compact, very small front, so a small crumple zone in the front. So it was very unsafe. And there were all these like frontal crashes, and it was horrible, right? So I think GM had one too. I can't remember what the GM was called. It was the Aerostar from Ford, and then the Previa from Toyota. So all the cars, all three of them, many of the people who were building these things had issues. But what Toyota did, as soon as the news broke that these cars were horribly unsafe and all that, they completely killed the Previa line. It was done. Like as soon as the news of this came out, killed that line, stopped making them. I think they had a year off. Like there was no minivan for a year or something. Don't quote me on that. And then the very next model was the Toyota Sienna, which went from this problematic problem child to a 5-star, the safest minivan ever tested car. That was Toyota's approach, right? Whereas like Ford and others kept making the same crappy thing for far longer and didn't have a replacement for many more years. And this is kind of one of those like cultural or this is one of those things about your company culture. And General Motors handled this very poorly, I think, like you mentioned. And as this story now unwinds, it appeared to me they were kind of biding their time until LG paid up, and then they were going to go take care of this. That is the wrong way to do this thing. If you got to borrow money or whatever you got to do, you got to go fix it and then go get the money on the back end. You don't wait around while people are, I saw those signs like GM Bolt owners not allowed in here. Like that's absurd, right? That is such a tarnishing mark on your record. So the other thing with this too,
it's like the Samsung Galaxy phones exploding, and
yes,
if you have a Samsung Galaxy, you can't bring it on the plane. You
can't fly.
It's like, come on. And the reaction of Samsung to that was really bad too. It's like some of these companies need to be more proactive, get ahead of it as fast as you can. It's not only good for the consumers for our safety, but it's also good for PR to show that you care and that you're taking appropriate actions to make sure that things are resolved.
There's also a greater challenge for EV companies because you have to have a safe battery throughout the entire supply chain. So like, for example, if your graphite, instead of being 99.9% pure, had some impurities that get hot or reactive in some negative way, and your vendor for graphite didn't tell you that or something, or the separator company had a defect and they didn't know about it until, there's a million things that have to all happen right. Whereas in the gasoline car, you freaking put a gas tank and you ship it on its way, right? So this is a challenge that needs to be really addressed well. And so the battery makers, and you would think LG would have figured this out. They make batteries more than anybody, right? But it was kind of on them and it was their fault. So even though it wasn't GM's fault, it was still kind of a problem that they had to figure out. But this is important that they have a good relationship because I guess LG will be working with them on the Ultium stuff.
Yes.
So it couldn't just be like a knockout, drag out kind of fight between the two because they got to turn back around, hug and kiss each other and get back to work. So hopefully this is moving in the right direction. I know a couple of people in the comment section probably have a Bolt. I remember last time there were some people. So I'm curious, what's your strategy? Do you just wait it out and wait for the replacement pack? And like you said, the ease into you're welcome back in your own garage again. Hurrah. Or do you are you still do you want to get rid of the car or what? I'm kind of curious how people feel about it, but at least it's something, right? Something's better than nothing.
Exactly. Ready for the next one?
Yeah. So this is a fun one. Foxconn is a company you would probably have never heard about unless you follow Apple. Foxconn does all the manufacturing for Apple, this is interesting, right? Tesla and Elon want to manufacture. That's what Elon's all about. And Apple's the opposite. They want nothing to do with any manufacturing. They design and then they outsource the manufacturing. And there are some pros and cons to both. But Foxconn is just a manufacturing powerhouse. Now, I would have thought it was more about consumer electronics, not as much about cars, but here's the Foxtron, their first electric vehicle. And so this vehicle, I think, is going to be produced for the American market by 2023. Now, like everything else, I don't know how much car manufacturing prowess they have, how, like building an iPhone and building a car are completely different things, but a company like Foxconn, I think, could pull it off. So we might see this car in North America. But what's also interesting is I think what they really want to do is be a white labeling company that could build EVs for other people. So this article mentioned like Lordstown Motors, Apple potentially. So imagine if you have this cool design for a car and Fisker even potentially. So imagine if you had a really cool design for a car, but you're not going to go raise $20 billion to build a factory. Maybe you just have a cool design and then you work with them and they tell you the price per car. They build the molds. They do all the heavy lifting and they can tell you, for this much money or this many units per year, here's what you're looking at. Now, these will be like bespoke, very boutique manufacturers potentially, but I kind of like this idea. I think this is what we need to really have a burgeoning like new startup culture. Not every company is going to be like Rivian and Lucid where they have so much money to do all of this. Many more will fail if not for this. So I think this is cool. But I just don't know. Do you know if they have any history with automotive manufacturing?
This is their first car ever. And so when I saw this story, it was, how seriously are they taking this? I know they want to build cars for other people, which is great if you want to get at that industry. But remember a couple of years ago at CES, Sony showed off their EV prototype that was actually an amazing car that everybody was like, I want that car. That was really a proof of concept to show we know what we're doing and we can help you out. And it was probably more about them trying to do that white label approach, trying to say to car makers, we can help you, work with us. I wonder if this Foxtron car that they've made, I'm wondering if it's more about that. And it's like they'll make a very small number of these. They're not looking at this to become another big hot seller around the world. But I wonder if it's meant to be just a small kind of toe in the water to kind of prove a point. We know how to make a good car. Come work with us. And I wonder if it's more about partnering with companies because they bought out the Lordstown factory in Ohio, and they're going to be helping Lordstown make their trucks. And so then they're also building another factory, I believe, in Wisconsin. They're planning on building cars in Thailand and here in the US in 2023. So it's like they clearly have big ambitions, but I think you're right. I think it's more about the white label approach than making it themselves. And if you look into Foxconn, they make everything for everybody. They make like Xboxes and everything I've known them for is consumer electronics. This is like the biggest thing I've ever heard of them making. Like they make TVs and game consoles and iPhones and things like that. But an actual car, it's surprising to me that they're doing this. The interesting part that we should probably note of is there's a big unveiling event on October 18th, supposedly. So it's next week, where they're supposed to be unveiling this car. Same day as Apple. Yeah, I know that's gonna get drowned out in the news, but it's going to be announced on October 18th, and we're going to probably find out a lot about what their ambitions are around EV manufacturing, and I'm looking forward to that to see what they say. Because this is just leaks that we're seeing right now. So I'm going to be keeping a keen eye on this.
So Jose Santin says that there is a Foxconn plant in Wisconsin, and there's apparently been some issues and it's been a bit of a debacle. But imagine building them there for the American customers. Imagine having a factory that just does white labeling cars. So I actually really love the white labeling idea. And the reason is it allows you to separate brand love and passion from manufacturing, right? So for example, imagine the Foxconn phone. No one's buying it, but they're going to build a great phone. They literally build every iPhone. And if you think an iPhone's a quality device, it's because of Foxconn. They're the ones that build this thing. But as a consumer, I want the Apple because that's kind of what I've synonymized with quality or whatever it is I believe in, right? So the same kind of goes for cars. Like if you think about it, Lucid and Rivian have to do both. They have to like appeal to some brand and loyal customer base and build this gorgeous machine and then learn how to be mastery manufacturers. That's not normally the case. Like if you watch Shark Tank, I come up with a cool idea and then I find a guy who will manufacture it. I'm not building a factory and manufacturing it myself. That's too much for possibly one small company. So now imagine that you and I the vice versa car, and we could model it up and design it and test it. And we don't have to go figure out how to do manufacturing, because manufacturing is really hard. And I don't think you and I are gonna. I don't think we're gonna cut it.
No, we're not going to cut it. The one thing though is like Apple and other companies like Microsoft with their game consoles, they're designing the thing themselves. They're coming up with exactly how the PCB is going to be laid out. They're coming up with what processors and things they're going to use, and everything about it is designed by them. And Apple, in fact, helps to design some of the machines that actually are needed to make the devices, because they come up with crazy, we have to do this chamfered edge that's never been done this way before. So they help design the machine to do that chamfered edge, but they want no part in the actually having to make the factory work at scale. And that's where Foxconn comes in. I don't know about Foxconn as how good are they at design. So here they are coming out with their own car. It's like, who actually designed the Foxtron? Was it Foxconn, or did Foxconn kind of like hire some kind of design agency to design them a car that they turned around and built? I have so many questions about this. I think
you hit it on the head a second ago, and you mentioned the Sony car. So the Sony car was kind of a proof of concept, or like, look what we can do. Yeah. Call us if you want to build a car. We'll do X, Y, and Z, the sensors and the thing and the thing. I think the Foxtron is the same thing, personally, because again, trying to build a reputation and a brand takes decades. Like Hyundai and Kia, the South Korean companies, are starting to become really popular and beloved now. It took like 30 years to do that. Honda, Toyota, it takes decades. So do you really want to do that, or do you want to just build the cars for other people? So to me, it's the Sony vision. It's, here's what we can do. You see this, and you can go design your own fancy body panels and make it cool looking, or whatever you want, but we could do the hard work of building it for you.
Right. It's going to be interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah. So you're going to skip the Apple event and watch this?
No.
I want a new MacBook. Yeah, I'm waiting.
So you ready for the last story?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, this one's a fun one. This is a light one. William Shatner going to freaking space. I mean, come on. This is.
You mean again, right? Clearly, I'm sure the man's been to space.
Yes. Blue Origin just yesterday had another launch where obviously this is for PR, but they sent. Look at him back there. I mean, come on. Captain Kirk floating in space. It was, I don't know about you, but I grew up looking at the Earth. This gets me a little choked up to look at, to see William Shatner just enjoying his time in space. And he's 90 years old. And the thing about this flight that just kind of tugged at my heartstrings was, I'm a big Star Trek fan, grew up watching the original series and all the Star Trek shows and movies ever since. And so the symbolism of, here's the guy who played Kirk going to space 50 years after he did the show, it really kind of, I'm not going to lie, I got a little weepy. And my brother was watching it live too, and he and I were texting back and forth, and he got a little weepy just because of the symbolism of it. And I was saying to my wife, the thing about this that got me super excited is, I love that even though it's a PR stunt a little bit, he's 90 years old. And this just kind of helps to show going to space isn't about being the fittest and being like these crazy like test pilots that become astronauts that they're shooting off into space. Anybody can go to space. Anybody can go to space. It's democratizing who can go to space. Right now, it's all about who has the most money to be able to afford to go to space. But the actual physicality of going there, all of us can do it. And that was the part that got me kind of like tugged at my heartstrings, got me really excited about what they showcased. And when they got back to Earth, when they were talking to Shatner about what he thought, one of the big things that he said was, this has basically changed me forever. And I don't want to lose this feeling, because it's changed his perspective on what it means. And he kept equating to going up into space as death, which I thought was a really kind of weird and poetic way to put it, but it's very Shatner, which was the veil of blue got ripped off so fast as they were going up. Like you were in blue and suddenly like ripping a blanket off of you in bed, just whoosh, you're suddenly in darkness. He thought that was so profound. It was just crazy how the atmosphere that gives us all life is so thin, and you can exit the atmosphere so fast. It gives you a completely different perspective on life on the planet. I don't know. I got really kind of choked up a little bit watching this.
Matt and his brother have a podcast about Star Trek where they go by episode by episode. Yeah, so any Star Trek fans, Matt, can you put a link to that?
Sure.
If it isn't already, put it in the chat or somewhere. But if you guys are Star Trek fans, you got to watch it. Him and his brother, seriously, it's deep dives. It's really, really awesome. And yeah, nerd hugs all around for sure. So definitely check it out. It's something I've actually been watching. I like watching the Farrell brothers get together. It's good fun. I watch your. Exactly. By the way, special chat, super chat from the Knife Dude. Thank you so much for your super chat. There's no message, but we appreciate you. I've seen you on here before. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is one of those stories that for me brings it full circle. If you watch Star Trek as Matt did, as I did growing up, maybe to a lesser extent than you did, Matt. We watched science fiction. It was this world that didn't exist, and people in their minds it was as far away as anything else. But we're kind of doing it now. I'm not saying we're at Star Trek levels yet. We don't have warp drive and we don't have colonies and a federation and stuff. But it all comes from the imagination. You got to kind of dream it, think about it, and then you start to get out there and do it. That's kind of all dreams start. Every person who built a car, or like if you ever hear some of the founding stories of car makers like Koenigsegg, for example, Christian von Koenigsegg, they just had big dreams and they kind of, as kids, and they obsessed about it, and they got older and they were actually able to do it. All they could think about was making those things happen. The inspiration for a generation. We had Star Trek around the time of the space race. That was like one of the great times to be alive, and I'm just happy that we're back to that now. I do feel a general sense of awe and wonder for space again. And there's some negative sentiment. I've gotten a fair bit of comments when I make space videos about how it's just for the rich. But so were plasma TVs when they first came out. So were the first Teslas, right? It's kind of how it starts. But I do think we're in the golden age part two. Is that too bold? I don't know.
Yeah, for me, it's like science fiction is like, if you're a futurist, I consider myself a futurist. I get really excited about the potential for the future. And it's like watching Star Trek as a kid, like watching Jean-Luc Picard, who I've got his hairstyle going on, like walking in his ready room with a data pad, and I now have an iPad. So it's like I'm freaking, like, as a kid, that thing seems so science fiction to me, of like, oh, he's got this computer that's like a sheet of paper, and it's like I basically have one now. That it's like where we're going, like communicators, there are iPhones. It's like we're actually starting to live and see some of those things that felt like science fiction 50 years ago are now becoming reality. And space flight and colonizing other planets. Elon Musk wants to colonize Mars. It's like a lot of these people have been inspired by science fiction and science fiction stories and things like Star Trek that got them wondering what they can do. Can I make that actually happen? And they're going out and making it happen. So for me, space travel, yeah, it's completely out of the realm of possibility because it's still millions of dollars to get to space. But this is the early days. Fast forward 100 years, 150 years. I mean, think about air flight. Flying on a plane when they were new was crazy expensive. And now most people can afford to do a flight, get on Southwest. Well, maybe not Southwest right now because they're having problems, but get a cheap airline fare and you can fly to Austin if you wanted to. So it's the idea of spaceflight becoming more democratized and cheaper over time seems inevitable at this point, and it gets me super excited.
Yeah, I wasn't around when like the first jetliners emerged, but I'd imagine it was the same thing. A lot of people going, "Look at this, another toy for the rich. It'll never be me. I'll be on my train."
Yeah.
And yeah, fast forward 50 years and flying a flight is anyone can do it. There's no class. There's no like social and economic factors that go into it. Anyone can fly. Yeah, I think that'll happen for space as well. Maybe longer term, there needs to be like economic incentives, right? It can't just be tourism. Airline travel isn't just tourism. Part of it is work. Part of it is a million different things. So as companies like the big three that we've got right now keep going to work on some of these challenges, it will definitely come down in price.
Yeah. Well, that was our last official story for the day. So we're going to transition to Q&A and just talking to you guys. But also, Ricky and I did want to kind of touch on one last topic that we were talking about before the show started. And it's the whole Tesla full self-driving, the score system that they have in their app that grades you and how you're driving. The reason I brought it up to Ricky was I've had a rating of 100 in my score for quite a while. And just like it was yesterday, I was driving out on the road, and I don't know about you guys, but I have my accident avoidance system set to like medium. So it's kind of pretty aggressive for letting me know if something's going to be a danger. And I'm driving down the road, and hundreds of yards in front of me, somebody stops to make a left-hand turn. I'm in no danger of hitting this person. I'm actually taking my foot off the accelerator. I'm just starting to slow down, and the car freaks out, sends off the alarms. Oh my God, you're going to hit somebody. And I'm hundreds of yards away. There's no way I'm going to hit this car. And now my score is a 72. And it made me realize, holy crap, the way they've set up the grading system in this thing is completely broken, because the accident avoidance system, it's not about it going off. That's the problem. It's how you react when it does go off. It's meant to be there as an assistive device to help you avoid an accident. It's not a sign that you were about to cause the accident. It's supposed to help you with defensive driving. And so it's like, in my situation, if you'd seen it, there was no danger, but yet it's knocked me from 100 down to 72. And I was also saying to Ricky, I used to work in video games, and I can't tell you, you can come up with a game design for how it's going to score what you're doing in the game, and you can think you have every like little thing figured out and how you're going to motivate players to do certain things to get certain scores. And then you have your first tester start playing the game, and oh my God, there's this gap that you totally didn't think about. And you have to kind of go back to square one and rethink the scoring mechanisms because you completely botched the weightings of things. And this feels like they did not take into account the weightings of things, because what if I had had my accident avoidance system turned off? Or what if I had had it set to low instead of medium? Would that have affected what happened? Because if the accident avoidance hadn't gone off because I had it set to low, then I would still be at 100. And the fact that there's probably something in there that I'm able to adjust that affects my score, it's like, why don't we just all turn off our accident avoidance system, and then we won't have to worry about that getting knocked on us? That is, if that is true, because I do think it's true, the way that they've set up the grading system is completely broken, and it's not going to give them any valuable data because it's completely bogus. So I'm just wondering why, how did they overlook this? And I hope they adjust this soon, because I don't care if I get full self-driving now or 6 months from now. I'm not in a race to get it. I'm not going to adjust how I drive to try to game the system at all. But there are lots of people that really desperately want to get it. And it's the fact that the system could potentially be gamed in this way, that's a problem.
I'm going to address that in a second. First of all, thank you for the super chats from Bernard Way. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate you. I don't think, Bernard, I've seen you on before, so if you're a new viewer, welcome, and so happy to have you. There's a second one from Bill O'Barr, one of our regulars. Thank you, Bill, as always. He says, Ricky, are you considering Starlink for your next house? I don't think the Latitude, I don't think we qualify yet for Starlink, from what I gather. I would get it just for fun, no matter what, as soon as I was able to. So I would consider getting it. But what's interesting is part of the reason why we're buying this house is there's a second detached house for our studio to run our business, which means we have 2 addresses. I believe I could get 2 internet connections and then like aggregate them together to get better speed. I don't know, because I don't have fiber. That's the problem. Where I live, we don't have fiber yet, and it's a huge pain in the butt, but we shall see. All right, going back to Matt, what you were saying, I will say public service announcement to anybody in the greater New England area. If you see this man on the road, just go the other way. He is a menace to society, and will probably mow you down. No, it's such a funny. This is such a funny thing. We were joking about this before the show. RCDIY has a very good insight. He says it didn't matter what the FSD selection criteria was, it would get criticized. Very true, 100% true. Mm-hmm. There is nothing Tesla could have done that would have worked out better. But what they ended up doing, I think, is complete hogwash for the reasons Matt mentioned. These are settings in my car. And I remember when I first got the car, I was like, oh, just to be safe, I'll put it to very conservative, which means you'll get the DDD, like imminent crash detected for someone, like quarter of a mile away. And that was clearly too much, and started getting so annoying that I lowered it because it was just giving me way too many false negatives. But if you're telling me, and we don't know for sure, maybe we can find out or more news will break. But if you're telling me that every time that happens, I'm getting dinged on my score, that would drive me bananas. Now, I don't have FSD, I don't have a score, and I can't tell you how happy I am. I get in my car and I live my life. I drive it. The reason why I love my car so much is lockdown, the pandemic, we're all kind of stuck at home. We have been. I work from home. I don't have a lot of reasons to drive. So now I'm the one who gets to take out food, or I run a couple of errands because I love driving my car. And all this talk about the safety score, no thank you. I have zero interest in it. You can keep your FSD. I'll take like I said before, I love Tesla for the manufacturing and the engineering, the electrification. All this other stuff is just noise that is, I don't understand it, I guess. Autopilot works for me. I love it. I'm good.
Yeah, My whole issue with like, even if the accident avoidance isn't user controllable, like somebody pointed out, they believe they're only using the medium level, even if you have it set to off or low. If that's the case, that's great because it's out of my control. But at the same time, I kind of find using that as a guidance for you being a bad driver is kind of odd, because like I had it happen once over a course of a week. It's like, what if it should probably be the frequency of it happening? Like if you've had it happen 3 times in one drive, it might be a sign that you're driving too aggressively. But having it happen once in a period, it's like the weighting of how it works. The fact I got knocked down to a 72 was like, what? The weighting of that seems completely off, especially when you saw what actually happened. So I just find it a very perplexing way they've set the system up, and it feels unfair and not weighted properly based on what's actually happening. So I just think it's kind of a, personally, after this experience, I think it's kind of a bogus system they've set up for the grading.
So yeah, the question is how would you do it then, right? And this is a tough one because I think Elon and Tesla are getting some flack for how they're rolling this out and how they're, so they need something to be able to report to go, all right, regulators, here's our metrics, X, Y, and Z. At least it's something. Whether it's meaningful or it has false positives that actually is punitive to people who should have, I'm not sure about all that, but at least it's something that they can go, it's not like, oh, it's a lottery. Who knows? We're just rolling it out to random people with no idea what we're doing. That's not the case. So that's probably smart. Clearly, I'm the only person in the world who doesn't obsess about FSD all the time because, like Rui mentions, how can you not try it? Jay says it's not noise, it's the future. I agree. A lot of things are the future, and when it's ready, I'll talk about it. Until then, there's just other stuff that I find more interesting. I think it's a work in progress. Like I'm not tracking every day the solid state battery breakthrough. I'm not like every day I'm not looking at like where we are with fusion and why we don't have nuclear fusion yet. When something emerges, I'll look into it. But it is a future. It's cool. Love it. I'm glad they're doing it. They should do it. I personally, I don't need to, like you mentioned, like I don't need to know, like I'm not on Twitter every night begging Elon to be one of the people to get it and stuff. Maybe it's just more of a personal thing, but that's a different question from how they're going to roll this out. But I do think so far they've had good progress, right? They haven't had any issues, an incident, and the progress has been really solid. One gentleman mentioned that like 10 dot whatever it was, one of the updates was a regression. He felt like the car regressed in performance. But other than that one person I saw on Twitter, everyone has been raving about it. It's been increasingly impressive, less disengagement. It's doing more on its own. It's able to, like, it's pretty amazing stuff. I love seeing the videos on it. That's for sure.
RCDIY, thank you so much for your super chat. He says, what FSD selection system would you have for gradual release? Any thoughts?
So the car is outfitted with sensors and stuff. That's kind of the approach they're taking. And I mean, if you have 100 score, that means you're probably a pretty good driver, right? I think the opposite is not true. If you don't have 100, that doesn't mean you're not. But if you have 100, you're probably a pretty good driver. Like that, it means you're not slowing. You're not slowing down too late. You're not doing other things. You're not doing rapid accelerations or turns. Basically, all the stuff that I like to do for fun in my Tesla Model 3. But it probably means you're probably a good candidate. So as far as what the right way to do that is, yeah, I really don't know. It would require much more work and like in-person stuff for like having people do questionnaire. I don't know. I think Tesla's probably doing the best they can. And if these kinds of little things, gripes do emerge, maybe they can just improve on it. But short of like taking drivers, having them come into like centers and review their credit, their driving score and how many tickets and citations they have. And short of that, I can't think of anything better.
Yeah, either can I. But the reason I think that part of the system is kind of bogus is you have an imperfect self-driving system that's grading you. So it's like having a driver who's got his own problems trying to grade you as to being a good driver so that you can use a new full self-driving system. And so it's like there's the imperfections, like my accident avoidance thing that when it went off, it was laughable why it went off. It was like I could not fathom why it possibly went off. I'm driving 30 miles an hour, starting to slow down, and it still went off. And I'm hundreds of yards away. It's like stopping was not an issue, and it was actually starting to happen. So it's like it clearly thought something was happening that actually wasn't. And so if there's a system that's kind of imperfect, the way it's grading it feels off. but I don't have a better solution. It's like, this is a tough nut to crack. I don't know what Tesla should be doing to solve the issue. I think they're doing what they have available. They're doing a decent job. I just think it needs to be better. I think that it will get better over time too, because as the system itself gets smarter and better at driving, weirdness like what I experienced will become less and less, and they would be able to do a better assessment as to how good you are at driving or not.
I have a question for you, Maddie. I realized recently with a software update that the auto steer, like just what I have, the basic auto steer on the freeway, if I let go of the wheel, it's like, grab the wheel right now. Whereas for the last 2 years, it had like a timer, like 30 seconds or some time goes by and it would ask for me again. This is really preliminary. I haven't had really a lot of time to mess with it. But what I noticed was, you let go of the wheel and it would start beeping again. And I started thinking maybe they're using that camera even for the non-full self-driving people. So I just put my finger on the camera and just blocked it and did the same thing. And 30 seconds went by and it didn't do that. So they're clearly doing they're changing stuff. Like they're making changes. And I'll tell you right now, the some of the stuff is not as good as I remember it being. Like it's increasing the annoyance factor. I get it's a safety thing and all of that. But part of it too is the idea of like a driving score, a car that's watching me drive and judging. I'm kind of I've told you before, I'm very much like kind of a libertarian. I like just freedom. I don't want people looking over my shoulder. I don't want cameras everywhere. I think there's a little bit of inherent danger and risk in life. And I think privacy is very, very important. But if that camera is running and recording me, man, that bugs me. It really does. It's all this kind of stuff. I feel like there's very few enclaves in the world where you're free to be yourself anymore. Like your car is listening to you, or watching you every step of the way. All these new TVs have listening devices and stuff. That's part of why I think I'm not more interested in this. The idea of some car judging my every drive and giving me a score, not interested in that. I don't want that. No matter how great FSD is, I've driven my whole life, and until they figure out more stuff, I don't know. I'm probably in the minority here for sure, but the thought of more stuff that's monitoring me does not make me happy. You know how I feel about smart home stuff. I have no Google, no Alexa stuff in my house. I won't even. When people give them to me as a gift, I just turn them around and give them to other people. I don't even open the boxes and stuff. But maybe I'm alone on this one. I don't know.
We have another super chat from the Knife Dude. I'm trying to send an offer to ride/review my Sandars Metacycle as soon as I get it. October is the last payment and supposed delivery date.
Yeah, so the Knife Dude definitely reached out to me. He mentioned he'd bring it down so we can do a review. I pulled it up really quickly. I was taking a look at it. It looks super cool. It's like a little electric motorcycle. Yeah. So that would be really awesome. So send me a message, and if you're able to come down, I'd love to catch up and hang out. Another one from Robert Klauko, it looks like. Yep. And this is a good one. He says, I wonder what's your opinion on repairability of single cast part? It's the big question.
That remains to be seen. I've been thinking the same thing. Part of me feels like it's going to be very strong and it's going to be able to take a beating. But at the same time, if you do get in an accident and causes a problem, you're not going to be able to bang that thing back into shape. You're going to have to replace the whole front of the car, the whole back of the car. And at that point, it's like, is it considered totaled from the insurance point of view? Because that's going to be so crazy expensive to do. I have no idea. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think that is the flip of the coin for the argument of larger single piece parts, lower weight, better range, less complexity. That's all true. But it also means that if you have any sort of a nick in any one part of it, you might have to scrap the whole thing. So Tesla's record in terms of repairability is already, I've mentioned before, it's actually a weak point in my opinion, especially from an environmental perspective. If the amount of damage required to completely scrap your car and make it like not worth repairing is so high, that's not good for the environment. You're much better off having a car that, like for example, I have the same argument with the iPhone. Everything's one piece. If you get water in one thing, the whole phone is garbage. You got to throw it away and buy a new one. Whereas, I had a hard drive crash, or my NAND SSD broke, and you can open it up and change that out. The rest of your product is still good, right? That's the counter. Where Tesla falls, I think we probably need more data on this. People have mentioned that the single piece casting is very centralized. It's beyond the crumple zones. And one person mentioned if you have damage to that, that would be the equivalent of like frame damage to a normal car, in which case you'd throw it away anyway. It'd be scrapped and salvaged. So I'm optimistic that that won't be the case, but I think time will tell, definitely, when the first round of repairs and all these kinds of stories emerge. But that is the trade-off.
Yeah, a bunch of people are commenting that it's not going to be really an issue at all. Sandy Monroe has a discussion on single cast repairability. The limiting factor has talked about the casting stuff. And by the way, the limiting factor, if you're not watching the limiting factor, you got to go watch the limiting factor. He is incredible. So much good research in his videos.
We want to have him on the show as well. We'll try to reach out to him, Jordan, and see if we can get him on as a future guest.
One more thought on full self-driving. Do you think it's a little weird that to get into full self-driving, you have to be a good driver? But the point of full self-driving is so that you don't have to drive. Does being a good driver make you a better user of full self-driving, or are the people that you want to be using full self-driving actually the bad drivers?
Great question. I've seen this on Twitter a lot. I think end game, you're developing this tech for the bad drivers out there. Early game in the beta stage, I think you want a guy who's very cognizant and going to grab the wheel and be careful. I've been in the car with a couple of guys who have FSD, and they're on top of it. They understand that this thing is amazing, but they need to be able to jump in at a moment's notice. So I think, you do want responsible people early on. And then as this thing gets more and more fleshed out and more ready for mainstream and more for prime time, then you want the bad drivers out there to be the first to get it. But I think that would be when it's like in production.
Yeah.
It's a good question. And I will say, reading the comment section, the privacy debate is not as one-sided as I thought. There's some people who've gotten into, who've talked about the need for privacy as well. Jay has some awesome comments. He mentioned that if you're on a computer right now or you're on a smartphone, you're already being tracked all the time everywhere. This is a little bit of a slippery slope argument, and which I don't personally like. There's problems everywhere, to be sure, but that doesn't mean you should just, live in a glass house and walk around naked. You can still take measures. There's things that you can do. There are websites, by the way, that will tell you about the privacy scores for some of these products and tell you, like, your Samsung TV has a camera and a microphone that's always listening, but you can turn it off, and here's how you do it. Or, even hardware sometimes, if it has to be done via hardware. But I don't think it's all or nothing. I think we should just try to strive for this and push back at every opportunity. And I will say, I do feel like we're making progress with all the anti-Facebook rhetoric lately. I think the pendulum might be swinging back. Yeah.
Yeah. Facebook did not have a good week last week.
No. I think Krissa summed it up pretty well. She says, you want good drivers to teach FSD. Once FSD is a good driver, you want it to teach bad drivers. That's well said.
Excellent point.
We should print that and put on a
Put that on a t-shirt.
Put on a t-shirt. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Daniel Mater, this is good. Tim Da Vinci and Matt Farrell. The driving score thing is like with Bruce Willis as a taxi driver in the Fifth Element movie, and he's also bald. Coincidence? Think not.
I love that movie.
That was a good movie. That's awesome.
And Claudia's in there saying, hit the likes, guys. Okay.
She's very wise. I'm telling you. She knows what she's talking about. So
Yeah.
I would listen.
If you're enjoying the stream, hit the like button. Unnamed man just said, I won't allow Alexa in my home, but Tesla can make sure I'm driving well. I'm in the same boat. It's like, I'm not quite on the same spectrum as you are, on the same part of the spectrum as you are. I'm more comfortable giving some of my privacy up if I think the trade-off is worth it. And for something like Tesla tracking how I'm driving, I'm totally fine to give that up. That's totally fine. If it gives me a safer, better car, I'm totally cool with that. But you could not pay me to have Alexa in my home anymore. It's like, there's no way I'm ever putting another Alexa device in my house. Sorry,
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, no. Alexa, I've never had Alexa, any of that kind of stuff. I never would. The car, yeah, maybe it's a fear of what could be. Like, imagine how things could play out in the future. Somebody subpoenaing you and being able to get your car footage and seeing what you're doing in your car when something happened to say that you
Right.
were here and X, Y, and Z in your car's GPS puts you here and here's a video of you doing blank. And I mean, it's always cool when you catch the bad guys, but you know, it's like when you spy on all American citizens, you're spying on all American citizens, and maybe there's the bad egg out there. But how about the millions of people who are just doing normal stuff? It's yeah, I've read a bunch of the Brave New Worlds and 1984s and stuff, and it's something I'm just always, I don't want to see that happen. I like the
Yeah.
you know. So there's RCDIY says that Edward Snowden exposed how laptop cameras can easily be hacked. You can do things about that. You can put like a little laptop cover on your laptop cameras. I do that for my iPads as well, just to be safe. But yeah, true. Dirk says, my biggest problem is not the collection of data, but the selling of data. Sadly, the two go very hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Collecting data is very expensive. You got to store it. You got to deal with all the back-end infrastructure. So selling it is the way you make money on it. It would be like farming and not harvesting, and selling crops. So the two kind of go hand in hand, unfortunately.
And insurance companies are now starting to ask, get cheaper rates if you can install this little tracking device and see how you're driving. And that,
I remember one of those.
That creeps me out, and it's part of the reason why I'm very excited for full self-driving. I don't want to have to worry about it. It's like, let the car drive itself, and then I'll pay my insurance for whatever it costs for doing that. It's like, I don't want to have to be necessarily tracked for how I'm driving if the cars are actually safer than we are at driving, which they will be.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Laptop microphones scare me more. So Jay says that, yeah, I have a software mute I install on all my laptops as well that I always have on. Not sure that's 100%. You can't overcome it, but yeah, I hear you. No, it's always tough. But there are times when we make strides. Like one of the reasons I support Apple at this point is their stance on privacy. And as of iOS 14, I think it was one of the recent upgrades, they give you this message that allows you to opt out of like tracking and all these other things. And Facebook was up in arms because Facebook was like, oh, this is how we make money. How can we? And now they're behind the scenes, they're talking about how, and they're telling their shareholders and stuff that we're not going to be able to make as much money because we can't just track everything that you're doing and sell this stuff. So Apple makes money on products. I like that idea much more than selling our information, but we are making progress. So it's definitely not like game over. I think there's still room to improve. And with Tesla's FSD, I'm curious how the next rollouts will happen, like how many more people will be invited. The amount of interest, like I said, I'm the exception. People are just bonkers dying to get their hands on this thing. So I just hope more people who are, the good drivers out there who are just so passionate about this can get their hands on it, start putting through its paces and get that
I'm
chance.
Nervous. It could go so wrong. It could go so wrong and then get blown up in the press for things of people's stupidity. So it's like, I want them to be picking the right drivers as they're rolling this out to make sure it goes out smoothly. And according to them, I'm not one of those drivers because I'm a 72 now, so I'd fail.
Yeah, I hear you. They do have, and I think I do like that Tesla's taking their time. Mm-hmm. I mean, Elon's on there telling people that he's going to have an update. I wish he would stop doing that and just do the hard work, because they have been very good about but taking their time. It's been delayed. We're going to take 2 more weeks. We're going to take a month. Good. Do that. Take your time and make something great, because I think the progress they're making is amazing, and it should not be rushed. And I don't think they need to answer for why there's delays. It's a complicated thing they're working on.
Yeah, exactly.
The real world is the only way to train FSD. Very true. It's also why FSD is so great. We only have a minute left, but we didn't have a chance to talk about this week. Maybe next week. But General Motors has their Super Cruise that they're kind of publishing. They're saying that it's going to be able to do 95% of stuff by 2023. Rivian's unveiled pricing for what they're going to charge. Lucid had that Dream Drive video, which didn't really tell me much. But yeah, maybe next week we could focus a little bit on that.
The full self-driving wars are...
The full self-driving wars.
They're heating up. It's going to start heating up over the next couple of years. Yeah, we should probably focus on that next week.
That could be fun. And I'm sure that people have opinions. So tune in, hit that, remind yourself for Thursday at 11 Pacific, 2 Eastern, and we'll dig into it.
And as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching. And you can also go to viceversa.show if you want to listen to the audio version of the show. And as always, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.